Welcome to Your Journey. I'm your host, Chuck Lewis, and we got a special guest with us today, and Shartara Miller. How you doing, Shartara?
Yo, I'm doing all right, Chuck. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, hanging in there. Obviously, we're in this COVID-19, dealing with this pandemic. How are you adjusting to everything? I guess we're in like a new normal, so how are you adjusting to it in your family?
Yo, at first I was going stir crazy. I'm not even going to lie to you. Kind of like trying to figure out what to do with my life as I knew it. But overall, maintaining to tap into some personal things that I knew I needed to get done. Family is doing okay, although most of them are, in Indiana,
Right.
as far as my immediate family. But everybody's doing well.
No, I'm glad to hear that. So I guess my question is, like, you're in education, you're an administrator. Do you think that we'll get back to normal, or will there be a new normal?
Definitely is going to be a new normal. I think whatever you thought you could imagine with schools and just like transitions and everything like that, it's going to be completely different. And, it's going to take folks to be adaptable, flexible and just willing to, work with the school systems as we're working with family and kids, as much as possible.
No, I definitely agree. I think flexibility is huge. Everybody's going to have to learn how to bend and be flexible during this point in time. It's unprecedented. We've never been through anything like this before. So everybody's going to have to work together, take their time, and just take one day at a time to get through it.
Amen to that.
Yeah, amen, for sure. So let's get right into it. So Shartara, you grew up in Elkhart, Indiana. Talk to me about what it was like growing up there as a kid.
Yeah, so I can't really talk about my upbringing without talking about Van Wert first. So I'm going to kind of jump there and then, hit back to Elkhart. So yeah, Van Wert, Ohio, predominantly, white, rural-like town. Can't even call it a city. But I lived there for 9 years of my adolescence when my parents split. My mom took me and my two older siblings, and we lived there. I always jokingly like to say you could look outside my bedroom window and see our elementary school to the right. Step foot on our front porch, you got the local museum to the left. Look straight ahead and you can see our YMCA, library, and even like our middle school and high school, which was in one building combined. So if that paints a picture of how small it was, like that is it. Population of Black folks was probably like 10, and we were probably all related in some way, so, but for the most part, it was cool. I met some solid people who I'm still connected with to this day, but that would, that helped shape me, and mold me to become the woman that I am. But we definitely experienced, some challenges and limitations, unbeknownst to a lot of folks. I was on the receiving end of a lot of racial slurs in and outside of school. Got in my one and only fight. I did not condone fighting, folks, but I did win. So I'm gonna bag that one. I did win, but it was an unfortunate situation. I got called the N-word by a classmate who I still remember his name to this day, during social studies class, out of all classes. But that's a convo for another day. Honestly, Chuck, we didn't grow up with much, but we had the necessities. I remember there'd be nights where my mom would go to bed hungry, just to make sure that we were fed. And sometimes our meals, I don't know if you remember this or if y'all had this, but sometimes our meals would come from Pizza Hut buckets. So like you read so many books in a week and then you get your personal pizza with a sucker in there. Or like Scholar of the Week, McDonald's and Burger King meal tickets and stuff like that. But my mom, she was holding down the fort, doing the best she could. She was working a full-time and a part-time job while going to college, getting her second degree. And so a lot of what we had came from Goodwill, Salvation Army, Walmart, Family Dollar. But we were always afforded with the opportunity to do anything and everything that we wanted within reason. That's how sports came about in my life. And most importantly, we were always surrounded with, the best guidance, unconditional love and support from our mom. And when our dad would come and visit, he still would drop, beautiful gems on us, words of wisdom. So kind of fast forward, and Chuck, to answer your question, how was the upbringing in Elkhart? It wasn't until I was entering my 6th grade year that my parents decided to get back together. Because baby number 4 was on the way. Hey sis. And so we moved back to Elkhart, which is a smaller city. Most folks know it as being near South Bend or near Notre Dame, Fighting Irish, but it's a predominantly working class city. Ethnicity, as we have become more diverse as the years have, gone by. Needless to say, dynamics shifted, financially we were a little more secure because now we're in a 2-parent household. But most certainly, you got mom and her ways and dad and his ways. And so you're trying to maneuver about whose rules do I follow now, because I've been so used to following just mom's. But now dad is putting his foot down. Okay, let's see what we got here. What are we working with? But yeah, we kind of graduated from, the Goodwills to now, Value City and Devs and stuff like that. But all jokes aside, we still had our challenges. We weren't balling out of control. We still had our limitations. But again, for me, adjusting to city life, so to speak, it really was an adjustment because even when my parents were split, we were still visiting Elkhart for my dad, and my mom still had family members that lived there. And I still have friends who became like family to me that I still kick it with to this day.
That's good. So you touched on it a little bit, but you've been an athlete your whole life. So at what age did you start playing sports, and what sports did you start playing?
Yeah, I mean, some folks like to claim that they came out the womb playing. Maybe that's me, I don't know. But, I just always been active. I think the earliest age that I could remember, I think it's 6, because that was around the time where I started playing t-ball with my cousin. And then it just kind of went from there, playing soccer, basketball, softball, ran track, whatever I could get into, I was, being active.
Man, no, that's good. So you attended Elkhart Memorial High School. What was your experience like there as a student and as an athlete?
Oh my goodness. What wasn't it like? I mean, it was a pretty dope experience. I really don't have many complaints. I mean, obviously you go through trials and tribulations, like the teenage trials and tribulations, oh my God, who's going to take me to the dance? And, you want the finest boy, and especially being an athlete, you want an athlete. But at the time that I entered, Chuck, my brother, who was the oldest of us, he was in his senior year, living his best life as a star athlete. My older sister was a sophomore, living her best life. She wasn't much of an athlete, but she had her crew that she rolled with. And then I entered as a freshman with my cousin, who's like a sister, and she was a force to be reckoned with. So when somebody got her riled up, it was a sight to see, Chuck. So I had a number of, family members already there, but then I also had, different social circles, you kind of roll with and vibe with, who your crew is in that certain sports season. But then you had your core people that you hung with. And so, that was cool. But outside of the social aspect, I was more of an ambivert. So I kind of was more reserved and shy, and people were always like, but aren't you an athlete? And I'm like, yeah, but I would be cool kicking it at home, in my room watching ABC Family or Disney, eating a bowl of cereal. Not even gonna lie to you, Chuck. But just kind of to really answer your question, being a student, I was a part of different organizations such as Sigma Beta Epsilon, Notre Dame Talent Search, and our mock trial, because I was really into law, and kind of balancing the two of being a student and an athlete, make sure that grades were maintained, make sure I was involved. Being an athlete, sometimes it was like a tug of war, and I had to choose which one. But what I will say is that the skills and the molding of character that live in that dual high school life afforded me is beyond measures, and something I will forever be grateful for, because you just, you're able to see what it means and what it looks like and what it takes to really put in the work to just, better yourself.
Right. No, I agree with that. Me being a former athlete myself, that time management and balancing the two is key, and so you can't have one without the other. It's a student athlete, right? So it's a dual role. And so trying to operate in that dual role could be tough, but you did pretty good with that. In your senior season of soccer, you were awarded MVP by the Indiana Coaches Association. How did it feel to achieve that award?
My goodness. That moment, and coupled with being named to play on the Indiana All-Stars basketball team, was euphoric. I've always, sorry, I just got a little distracted. Amazon Prime. But, like I said, it was euphoric. I've always prided myself on, operating with heart, humility, and just hustle, and never claiming to be the best, but always being the one to put in the work. And so when I received that, I immediately thought of that universal line, hard work pays off. And I was like, man, it really does. And so again, not being used to being the one in the spotlight, so to speak, even with holding captain positions, it was like, man, I didn't have to compromise how I operate on a daily basis. I didn't have to compromise my values or integrity to receive such awards and positions. My talents were recognized and honored anyhow. So it was great.
No, that's good. And I think you were doing it at a high level on the athletic side, but even on the academic side, you operated at a high level as well. Your whole high school career, you maintained a GPA of a 3.5. How were you able to balance academics and athletics? I know you talked about it a little bit before, but go a little bit more into detail how you were able to balance both of those.
Absolutely. So first, I would like to just say, as I'm sure you probably experienced, there was no other option. Living in the household of a strong Black woman who was educated, education was and is the only pathway. So that, in itself was enough motivation. But so just having a great exemplar in my mom, like I said, she was maintaining everything and going to college for the second time with 3 kids, but also just knowing the adversities my dad had to endure. He grew up below poverty, and so when he had the opportunity to go to college, he didn't get to finish because what happened was his first year was paid for by a family friend. And because he had a partial scholarship for playing sports in college, but he couldn't continue on, unfortunately. And so he always kind of instilled in us, be better, do better, and strive for a life to where you're not having to solely depend on anyone else. And so kind of having the exemplar, but then also knowing the other side of it, it was dang, you gotta drive. And then, being a young Black woman, I always knew I had to work twice as hard as my white counterparts. And that's no shade of them. It's just what the reality is. And then constantly receiving academic awards and opportunities from NAACP, the National Honor Society. I'm trying to think, the National Youth. There's this National Youth Leadership Forum that I receive invites to the conferences just because of my leadership, and even with the law forum. And so kind of having those things in play, it's okay, that's what's going to keep me motivated, because I see I'm reaping the benefits. But to the root of your question, how to balance it all, it's you have to be willing to sacrifice certain things. You see what I'm saying? Like, you can't, like, of course I have friends, like, it's like, oh, like, let's go to Steak and Shake, you know, let's go to Taco Bell after the football games, you know what I'm saying? And you know, kind of do like the parking lot pimping, you know. Hopefully I'm not dating myself when I say stuff like that, but you know, that's what it was. And it's like, but I knew I had a bigger mission. And so I think the biggest thing is like knowing what to sacrifice and being okay with sacrificing those things. And time management, you know that, Chuck. I mean, you play at the collegiate level, you know what time management is. And for us, like, you had to learn at a young age on how to do that. So I think those were the two key factors too.
Well, obviously, you were able to manage your time pretty good. You decided to attend Indiana University. What made you go there, and what other schools were you thinking about going to?
Yeah, so first of all, go Hoosiers, Big Ten. So to kind of like go back and then jump forward, I had been receiving offer letters from D2s and JUCOs. And I'll be honest, I was, you know, being 18, you know, well, actually 17 at the time, I was feeling like a point of exhaustion, and I couldn't understand where it was coming from. And so I got to a place where, even though I was receiving offers to play soccer or basketball, and oddly enough, one university reached out about track, and I was like, no thanks. But for me, it was like, I just want to focus on my academics. I had a 7-year plan, do 4 years of undergrad, 3 years of law school. And so I thought of going to Indiana State University, Sycamores, where my brother and my older sister were already attending. And I'm like, let's just make it a family affair. And when I mentioned it to them, they were like, are you crazy? Absolutely not. Like, you worked your butt off, you know. And it wasn't any diss to ISU. They just knew, like, I needed something a little more challenging. And so I think it was my brother who had mentioned IU, and I was like, well, okay, well, let's go ahead and make it happen. So I applied. It was the only university that I applied to. By the grace of God, I got accepted and received scholarships out. I received scholarships for my academics from Indiana Law Bar Association, because again, law was my thing. And so I received scholarships from them, but also just maintaining a high GPA throughout my academic career at IU, continue to receive scholarships from them as well.
That's good. And so you go from Elkhart, Indiana to Bloomfield, Indiana. What was that first year like transitioning into college?
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, it was like a pretty smooth transition because I had already had examples. You know, I saw my brother transition, and he played football at I-State. You know, I saw my older sister transition, and she worked on campus. She did like the work study to earn money. So I kind of had like a picture of like what to do. But it was like, we dropped my brother off for college, my mom cries. We dropped my older sister off to college, my mom cries. We dropped me off, my mom cusses me out. And I'm like, what is happening here? And, you know, just, you know, you've been to IU, so you know how big the campus is. It's a Big Ten, you know, university. And I'm living in Briscoe, which is the furthest dormitory away from, you know, the academic halls and, you know, Bursar and everywhere where I have to do my orientation. And for folks that don't know, Bloomington is in southern Indiana. And so it's like right at the cusp of like Kentucky and stuff. And so it can get really hot. And that day it happened to be really hot. My mom does not do the heat. So she's fussing and cussing. And my dad is cracking up. And my baby sister's like, what to do? So I would say that transition was, you know, kind of hard. I'm like, dang, you ain't cry for me? Got it. But outside of that, just reminding myself, do not gain freshman 15. And so I was constantly working out and hooping at our recs, like Hyper and SRSC, and crazy situation went down. So like this young lady who I used to hoop against, she hooped for a school in South Bend. She would see me around the way. And so by the time my sophomore year, and I'm going to jump back to freshman year, but by the time my sophomore year hit, she had reached out to me because she had played for IU women's basketball team. And she was like, hey, we got a new coach. She's looking for on-campus talent. We need you to come on to this tryout. And so, we got a few of us young ladies who were interested. We get there, we try out. Like it was euphoric to be in Assembly Hall on that court. Like, oh my gosh, I thought I was done with this. Unfortunately, things didn't pan out due to some other situations that were like out of our control. But most folks don't know I had the opportunity to play for Hoosiers.
Wow.
Women's basketball team. But, there was that. I think the biggest transition to kind of jump back to freshman year was just this sense of freedom times responsibility that you had to like manage. And so, of course, you trying to kick it, you trying to go to the parties, especially the Black fraternities and sororities, Divine Nine, like, you had to be in there. But also like understanding like what you were there for. I told you I had a 7-year plan. Now that will come at a later date about the whole plan situation, but maintaining a certain GPA, like that was me. I had to do that to continue to get money. But yeah, I would say those things and just knowing who you are, and standing on that.
Well, all that worked out for you. You graduated with your degree in criminal justice. How did it feel to walk across the stage?
Ooh, so actually, I didn't even get to walk across my stage.
Oh, okay.
But here's why though. So I told you I had a 4-year plan for undergrad. I graduated in 4 years. My older sister graduated in 5. So I stayed in IU. They had the same graduation date.
Wow.
At the same time, which was on a Saturday. So what I did to kind of, again, you got to know when to bend a little, when to be flexible and sacrifice. And so IU had offered through the Neil Marshall Black Culture Center, the Black celebratory ceremony. So, and that was Friday night. So my family came in and everybody came in, and that's the stage that I walked across, but I was never able to be, in Assembly Hall or wherever they held it that year to walk across the stage. But it was still a great time and the best decision that I could have made for my family.
All that stuff is good, and it puts you in a position where you are now. So you graduate from Indiana University, but then you have to transition back home to Elkhart, Indiana. Talk about that transition.
Dun, dun, dun. I told you I had a plan, Chuck. But the proverb, you make a plan and watch God sit back and laugh.
Yeah.
And so things did not go accordingly. I took an LSAT, prep course and, try to study on my own time, but was also in a relationship and kind of, put that, a little bit above some, things, put my social life above some things, and kind of just really got distracted. I mean, to be transparent. So in IU Law, School of Law was the only law school that I wanted to attend. And where I scored a pretty decent score on my LSATs, it wasn't good enough to get into IU. And that was a big blow. I mean, I think that was the biggest blow to my heart that I ever endured, in that stage of my life. And so it was difficult to admit that. Right. And to go back home kind of feeling like empty-handed, like, dang, I worked so hard for this, but then I allowed myself to get distracted, and now I got to go back home, move in with my parents, and figure out life as I knew it. Granted, it wasn't the end of things, but that's where I was at.
Yeah, it's like when you transition back home, it's like you got to start fresh again. You got to start back over again, and then some of the friends that you had might not be there anymore, and just some of the relationships that you had, just some of even the connections that you had. You got to either rebuild some connections or just start fresh with everything, and then just going back into your home. It was different when you left, and then coming back as an adult, ready to work and be a professional can be a tough transition for you. But you were able to transition. You end up getting hired at Elkhart County Court. How did that all come about for you getting that job?
Yeah, so I started working at the courthouse actually when I was a senior in high school. We had the opportunity to either like work at the career center or find somewhere to hold an internship. And my mom is in the legal field, and so she had a lot of connections with different attorneys and judges and stuff like that. And she was able to, kind of lock in this interview with me to work in adult court my senior year in high school. So my administrator, Laura, who is now like another mom to me, because she's still in my life, she had transitioned to juvenile court, where I got hired on full time as a young adult, working under Magistrate Dominique. And I had been working seasonally, so like over summer breaks at IU, I would come back and they would allow me to just work seasonally. But when I got hired on full time, they had, pulled me in to the judge's chambers, and I was like, oh shoot, what I do? Like I just started, like frick. and I'm like just looking at the two. I'm like, oh my gosh. And if you ever met Magistrate Dominique, she is fierce and classy, but and like knows her stuff, but she always wants the best for people. And so she flat out just told me, like, look, Tara is one of my nicknames. She's like, look, Tara, we gonna hire you on here, but you got 3 years. You got 3 years, and within those 3 years, you need to figure out, because she and Laura had recognized so much more potential in me that they didn't want me to get too comfortable. So that's how all that came about.
Well, no, all that sounds good. So you were working at the court system for a while, but then you decided to go back and get your master's degree. What inspired you to go back to school?
Everything. Everything. Like I said, Chuck, I wasn't done. I knew bachelor's degree wasn't my plateau. And even though I have my master's degree now, I'm still considering my doctorate degree. So, but what kind of motivated me is, one, that conversation that I had with my judge and Laura, but also just conversations that I had with my mom and some of my closest confidants, because I was like, no, there's so much more that I want to do. I don't know yet, but at that time I had been researching different programs, and Indiana University of South Bend happened to have a master's program in public affairs, and it was aligned to what I was already doing within the community and just personally. So I was like, ooh, let me go ahead and tap into that, because at that time I had been volunteering my time in the community with coaching and refereeing. I was playing in exposure league, just all these different things. And so I was like, yep, let me go ahead and capitalize on this right now. And so that's what happened.
You talked about it a little bit earlier with coaching. So you get an opportunity to coach girls soccer and girls basketball at Elkhart Memorial, your old alma mater. What led you back, or what led you even into going into coaching?
Yeah, man. Oh my goodness. So, as you, been a student athlete, and you just recognize when there are solid coaches, how influential they can be on your life. And for me, having already been involved in the community, having at that time working in juvenile court and seeing some of the kids come in, and I'm like, wait a minute, I know your cousin, or I know your auntie, or blase skip. And it just felt like a natural fit, because I had already been going there to work out and just go to open gyms, keeping in shape, because I was also, like I said, I was playing in a community basketball league, which was an exposure league. And then I ended up getting an opportunity to play for 2 different semi-pro teams, semi-pro teams. And so for me, it was just like a natural transition. But like, being able to serve as a mentor, a leader, a confidant, like some of the girls, and you know, Chuck, I mean, I know you have all sons, but you've been in middle school and high school before.
Yeah.
You know how girls can be.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, having them being able to confide in me about stuff that they may not have been able to do with their moms and being closer in age at that time, you know, to me, it was like giving back, but it was also like just doing something that came natural to me.
So you complete your master's degree, but then you decide to accept a teaching job in Cleveland, Ohio at Breakthrough Charter School.
Yeah.
How did that all come about? Now, here you are back in Elkhart. You're working for the court system, you're coaching, and then you decide to take a leap of faith and go to Northeast Ohio and Cleveland and accept a teaching job. So how did that all come about?
Ooh, so like I said, you know, I was in the master's program, public affairs, and I was doing government and nonprofit track. And so when I was like reflecting on all my research papers and projects, it surrounded really just going in, for lack of better terms, just going in on the fallacies of educational policies, the racial inequities and disparities amongst our education systems and school districts. And I realized that I was like being a hypocrite, because here I was just talking about it and not being about it, just like some of our policy makers. And again, I'm not here to shade anybody. I'm just telling you my story.
Yeah. No.
And so I got to a place where I was like, okay, no longer can I be a spectator. I need to become an educator. And so I happened to be thumping through some like old paperwork, you know, from undergrad, and stumbled upon some Teach for America paperwork. And that a friend of mine, well, actually my boyfriend at the time, had given me when we were in undergrad. And I was like, man, I ain't trying to, you know, teach, I'm trying to be a lawyer. Get this out of here. Yeah. But anyways, like it was like divine intervention. God had a calling that I didn't realize. And so I ended up applying. It was this long, arduous process. You know, I had to do, teach a sample lesson, this, that, and the fourth. But Cleveland was actually only in its second year. And I was in a relationship at the time, and my significant other, he was living near Cleveland. So I was like, oh my goodness, this will be great. I actually love Cleveland. You know, at the time, you know, felt like I loved him. So let's go ahead and do it. And again, by the grace of God, I got accepted, and that's how I got to Cleveland. Breakthrough was not my first organization that I was with. I was actually with a different school district, which will go unnamed, but they had dropped me, and also I think they stopped working with TFA, and so that's like a whole nother story that I'll get into later. But then I had a phone interview with an ICANN school, and then also with prep school within Breakthrough, but that was in person. And Jayla actually was in that interview, and she had the hardest questions ever. And I'm like, sis, we're supposed to be together. But long story short, you know, I got the phone call and I went with Breakthrough because that was just where my heart led me.
So you start off teaching 7th grade social studies. So how was that experience? Your first time in the classroom, never teaching before. What was that first year like?
Woo! Okay, let's just keep it all the way real. I was drowning. But also, even though I was drowning, I was also like given so many lifelines because my kids kept me going. You know, my newfound friends, you know, including Jayla, like kept me going. You know, part of the reason why I was drowning is because one of the requirements for TFA is like you have to do Summer Institute, which is the student teaching. And in order to do that, our Summer Institute was in Phoenix. So I did student teaching out there, but I had to quit my jobs. Like I was getting paid for coaching. I was getting paid from the courthouse. And then I realized, oh, shoot, I'm getting a pay cut. And with no income generating. And so here it was all the way in September at the end of September is when I got my first check from Breakthrough, because it had been prorated since I was hired on late. So financially, like I'm struggling, like I'm destitute, and trying to maintain all these bills. Like I get flipped upside down because I had this fancy car that I had to get rid of because of my new income, and so now I got that. I have bills that I never had to pay before, all these different things, while going through a horrible breakup, experiencing a state of depression, and then still trying to lesson plan, staying up until 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, waking up at 5 o'clock just to make sure that I was putting the best thing in front of kids. And that was really my lifeline, is like being in front of the kids. But it was a struggle, Chuck. It was no joke, because I was going through all those things, and then not having my family here, it was something.
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously you were able to make it through. After 2 years, you got promoted to Dean of Students. Talk about that transition, going from being a teacher now into an administrative role.
Yeah, I thought they were crazy at first. And the reason why I say that is because, one, like I was already interested in the dean role, because at that time, one of my mentors, Shump, he was serving in that role, but he was ready to transition out because he had been doing the dean role for so many years. And so he kind of pulled me aside, and he had recognized some of the things that I was doing beyond the classroom. Like I had started the girls basketball program, which we had much success with that program. I was coaching volleyball. I had started the poetry club, going to PTA and different community, events. Like my boys were like, "Hey, Miss Miller, you got to come to our football game on Sundays." And I'm like, I'll be there. Like, just have an umbrella and a bottle of water for me, because, the heat be messing me up. But, so he had recognized those things, and my ability to connect with, my scholars, my babies, as I like to call them, in our families. So anyways, trying to make a long story short, I presented this idea to my principal and my DCI at the time, and they were completely on board. They were like, "Yeah, we see that." And then when it came closer to the end of that year, I always had a summer job. And my summer jobs were always essential to me, because they weren't just any jobs. It wasn't like I was just, working at, a local grocery store. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it was always because I wanted something that was aligned to what I was doing. And so the summer prior to my second year, I was working as a school operations manager in Chicago, TFA. And then that second year, I was like, "Ooh, let me try to be an instructional coach through TFA for the Summer Institute." But I didn't get it. That door was closed. They were like, "Nah, sis, like, hey, we good off of you." And I was like, "Shoot, great." But I also had another opportunity to work for All Stars Project, which is a nonprofit out in San Francisco. And it was a fellowship, and it would have me working on the fundraising side, which I was like, yes, this will nourish my master's degree in my nonprofit, my love for nonprofits. So I ended up getting, there was like 50 of us candidates and only one slot open, and I ended up getting it. And so kind of backtracking back to the conversation with my principal, my DCI, at the end of the school year, I told him about this, and it was pretty much like, "Hey, you got to choose, because we need our leadership team to be here over the summer, getting new teachers prepped and ready. So it's that or this." And I said, "Well, it's going to be that, because I'm going to go to San Francisco, because I already got accepted. I think it's going to help me in especially like the vision that I have to serve in the dean role. This is aligned." Yeah. And so the door was closed, but another one was open. I get back, starting the school year. I'm not teaching social studies. I'm teaching an enrichment class that I had created, that they gave me the opportunity to. That class wasn't really going in the direction I wanted it, because teachers were kind of like seeing it as, well, let's go ahead and send the most misbehaved kids there, because it was all about social awareness and identity and community involvement. the dean that they had hired on was like, yo, this dean role is not for me. And so what ended up happening was she was like, I want to get back into the classroom. When she transitioned back into the classroom, that's when they had reached out to me and said, hey, well, you still interested? And I was like, I don't know, maybe, being childish. But then I ended up applying, and they took me through the ringer, but I got accepted and hired on. And so that's how the dean role came about.
So you served in that role for about 5 years, and then you got promoted to assistant principal at Breakthrough. How has your experience been in that role?
So it has been a short experience thus far because, I think with COVID, it kind of, put a halt to things because this is going to be my first full year as assistant principal. Within our network, we identified as principal resident, but to most folks, it's like an assistant principal position. By the end of this year of 2021, I will be the head of the school. But as of right now, it's a lot. I mean, we're over here trying to plan and prep for returning back to school as normal, so to speak. But we're also doing a lot of virtual sessions that, we're having to take lead on. But then at the same time, like when kids do come back, how are we going to properly readjust them to school life and readjust them to going to bed on time and waking up on time and getting to school? And then, some parents are still going to opt out like, hey, COVID is still out here. It's still lurking. Like, I'm not sending my baby to school. And so we're thinking about in what ways are we going to be able to combat attendance, like low attendance, should that happen? Should parents opt out? Are we going to provide virtual classes? So all those things are what's being considered right now. So this is a unique time for me to be transitioning into the position that I am.
Right. So you served in a couple of leadership roles. What would you say your leadership style is?
Yeah, most people that step into leadership definitely have a type A personality. I think with most folks that know me, that is not necessarily my style. I'm more, type B. I think one of the things that you probably picked up on is that I do operate with much humility. And that's one of the things that if you're not operating under humility, then you're not receptive to feedback. And that's something that I am receptive to. Everybody has areas of opportunity, areas of growth, however you want to define it as. So I'm super self-reflective, but also I understand how to discern when to lead on the main stage, and then when to be leading in the audience with my people, because I believe in leveraging others for their strengths, because just because I'm a leader doesn't mean I'm strong in everything. Wow. Now, I will do everything to in my power to learn and to close that gap. But if I know somebody else can do it better, whether it's a fellow leader or a teacher, I'm going to leverage them because I believe in collaboration. And teamwork. Like we're a family, so we're gonna do this together. So that's kind of like my leadership style and ability to listen, not to respond, but to listen to act together, to provoke change. Like that's what it's all about.
No, that's good. Definitely noteworthy. So as an African-American woman being in a leadership role, what challenges have you faced?
What challenges haven't I faced? Some are recognized, some are not, but I think the biggest thing is knowing when to assert my voice and being okay with that. Because oftentimes Black women, we kind of suffer a bit internally because we don't want to give any light to the stereotypical angry Black woman, right? And so we try to channel how we operate and we try to choose what we are speaking on and how we are speaking on it, because we don't want to be typecasted. But that's an awful shame, because it's like, just because I speak up doesn't mean I'm angry. It's just because I'm passionate about it, and change does need to occur. So I would say, like, the challenge of suppressing my own voice, but learning how to speak up. The other one I would say is just standing on convictions, especially the role that I serve as a dean for multiple years. There are times where, there are staff members who want a certain consequence for a scholar, and because they're going off of, well, this is the handbook, this is what the handbook says, like, you are to uphold, like, you're in the dean role, you're to uphold that. And I have to remind them, like, no, what I have to uphold is that we are holding our scholars accountable for their actions, but not dinging them and not making situations worse. And understanding the bigger picture. See, our Black and brown communities are already taglined with a high rate of suspensions. And then when you got so many suspensions, you dang near feel defeated. So you're more than likely to drop out later on, right? And so my job, especially being in middle school, is to try to create as many restorative practices as possible. So standing on those things, on what I believe, but also explaining them so that I'm able to help others learn,
I like that, restorative practices. These are all good notes for me. I'm writing notes down as you're talking. So definitely noteworthy information you're giving. So for a young educator that's aspiring to be in a role like yours, what advice would you give them?
I would say, first thing, always operate your authentic self, and make sure that you're walking in your purpose. I think never forget who you are as you continue to elevate. Those values that you had at the beginning need to be those values that you continue to step up and up and up. Be resilient. You're gonna, there's this one thing that I was talking to my best friend about, and I was like, yo, like, man can close doors, but God can reopen them. And so you're going to hear a lot of no's before you hear a yes.
Sure.
So, making sure that you are resilient and, persistent. And then I think the last thing, because there's so many different things that you can give, but I think the last thing, and this one is specifically for women. And, I don't think this man was trying to mansplain anything to me, but this did come from a man who's in leadership. And he goes, he said, men hardly ever question whether or not they are qualified for a certain position. And in fact, most men statistically apply for positions even if they're underqualified. He goes, but when it comes to women, we often question ourselves, and we often minimize our talents and close the door on opportunities because we are thinking that we are not qualified enough. Right. So the point is, understand that you are worthy to elevate. You have the power, you have the intelligence, you have the kahuna, so to speak, to be in that position. And if you are a believer, understand that at the end of the day, God is your credentials. Period.
Well put, well said. Definitely. Putting God first is definitely key, for sure. So over the years, you developed another passion outside of education. You have a huge passion for art. How did that come about?
I really, since, being a young kid, I always loved drawing and like just looking at an image and being like, okay, how can I draw it like realistically? But then my favorite, how can I draw it abstractly? And so that's kind of been my thing. And being in middle school and high school, I was in honors art, but that kind of tapered off because nobody ever like really says like, oh, you can be an artist and stuff like that. And so I kind of just let it fall to the wayside, but still every once in a while would continue drawing and everything like that. So it's just been a thing. And a few years ago, I was like drawing a lot, just kind of like meditating and drawing. And I was like, well, let me teach myself how to paint. So that's how it came about recently.
So you recently have been selected to be a part of the She Art exhibit. Can you explain what that's all about?
Yeah, so the She Art exhibit, I'm so excited about, being selected. It's through Deep Roots Experience. So if you're in the Cleveland area, like check that art gallery out. But it's all about uplifting, supporting, and highlighting women of color artists and revitalizing the inner city community by bringing the arts back into the community and showing that they do have different avenues that they can take. And so that's what it's all about. And we have an upcoming exhibit. This Saturday is the opening night. I'm super stoked about it, ready to just show off our works and bring something exciting to the community.
No, that's very exciting. So we're going to transition to the last segment of the show. It's called Top 5 segment. This is a segment where I give you categories and you give me your top 5 in those subject areas. So starting off with number 1.
Yes.
Who are your top 5 R&B / neo soul artists of all time? Or it could be your favorite artist, 5 of all time.
Yo, so difficult, but Lettucey. If you haven't listened to her stuff, listen to it. Maxwell, of course.
Maxwell. Okay. Right.
Yes. Lauryn Hill, India Ari. And I was battling between Erykah Badu and Jill Scott, but I went with Erykah Badu. I love you, Jill.
No, for sure. Maxwell and Jill Scott and some of the others that you mentioned, definitely legends of the R&B and created like that neo soul lane for a lot of upcoming artists that are in that lane thriving right now.
Yeah.
So my second question is that you played basketball. So give me your top 5 NBA players of all time.
Yep. So I'm gonna mesh WNBA with it too, because I gotta support us women. But of course Jordan. Period. Yeah. Karl Malone. Most people, wouldn't know that I'm a Karl Malone fan. Sheryl Swoops. Lisa Leslie. And again, that fifth slot is always so tough. But I'm going with Allen Iverson.
Allen Iverson.
Yeah. Yes, because he had a little bit of street and, was fine, which that.
No, all those were definitely good 5s for sure that have paved the way for a lot of players and have been Hall of Famers the whole time that they were in the NBA and WNBA. So my next question is give me your top 5 places you ever vacationed or visited.
Yes. I've traveled so many places, but Chicago will always be my favorite for a lot of different reasons. So Chicago's at the top of that list. Yeah. In no particular order thereafter, I would say LA, Mexico. I've been to Vegas, but I didn't really live the Vegas scene. So I'm going to have to go back, some other time. Toronto. Yeah, and then my last one, Brooklyn and Harlem.
Okay.
People might be against me for meshing those together, but they're going to be meshed together because I'm in an interview.
No, that's good. So my last question is give me your top 5 movies of all time.
Top 5, Poetic Justice. Come on now, Tupac and Janet Jackson.
Yeah.
Boys in the Hood. Love Jones.
Classic.
Lawrence Tate and Nia Long. Whew, that's when I first fell in love with poetry. Friday. Can't just choose one. Got to be all of them.
All of them.
And then this is going to be, Chuck, don't make fun of me on this, because this is going to be vastly different.
It's your top 5. I can't. Go ahead.
So hands down, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation.
Classic.
Classic.
Nothing funny about that. That's classic.
Okay, just making sure, but I added that one in there.
Nah, those are all good 5 movies, and for the whole segment, you gave some good names and some places that you visited and some people. We're at the end of the show. I just want to thank you for coming on. I had a great time talking with you, but also learning some things as well. And one of the things that I think that I noticed about your journey is sacrifice. You know, you've had to make some sacrifices during your career, whether it was sacrificing in college, whether it was sacrificing as a professional, and some things that you had to do to be where you are now. So all those things are part of your journey. One of the things about this show that's very important is that we want to make sure that we give people their crown or their flowers while they're alive. So we want to give you your crown today to make sure that you know that you're making an impact in a lot of people's lives. Working in inner city Cleveland, education, one of the worst cities and school systems in the country for years, and now they're bouncing back and thriving because of the charter school system, because of individuals like yourself going in there and not being afraid to be different, not being afraid to be creative, and not being afraid to really look a student in the face and help them in some of the places that they're vulnerable at. You know, and so I think all those things are important. I salute the work that you're doing. You haven't even hit your prime yet, so I know we got great work to come. But I just want to thank you for coming on and sharing your story so someone can learn from this. But even myself, I was able to learn some things from it as well.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Chuck. It's greatly so honored to be a part of your show. Thank you for having me. It's been a great experience, and I look forward to connecting more.
Nah, I appreciate you coming on. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in to Your Journey. Be safe and God bless.